friend. You have your songbook. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopijana Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Gaur Premanandi, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jai Gaur Premanandi. Okay, welcome everyone this morning to Srimad Bhagavatam class. By fate or destiny, I'm asked to give the class, so I hope there'll be something worthwhile you may be able to find. Today we're reading from the 9th canto, chapter 19, text 26. Yayati achieves liberation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shrutvaagatam Devayani Mene Prashtobham Atmanah Shri Pungso Sneha Vaiklavyat Parihasan Iveritam Shrutvagatam Devayani Mini Prasthobhamatmanah Shri Pungso Sneha Vaiklavyat Prihasam Iveditam Shrutvagatam Devayani Mene Prashobhamatmanah Shri Pungso Sneha Vaiklavyat Prihasam Iveditam. Do you want to try, Brent? You can try. Shrutva, hearing, Gatam, the narration, Devayani, Queen Devayani, the wife of Maharaj Yayati, Mene, understood, Prastobham, atmanaha, when instructed for her self-realization. Stripungsho, between the husband and wife. Sneha Vaiklavyat, from an exchange of love and affection. Parihasam, a funny joke or story. Eva, like. Iritam, spoken by Maharaj Yayati. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta. Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. When Devayani heard Maharaj Yayati's story of the he-goat and she-goat, she understood that this story, which was presented as if a funny joke for entertainment between husband and wife, was intended to awaken her to her constitutional position. Report. When one actually awakens from material life, one understands his real position as an eternal servant of Krishna. This is called liberation. Muktir hit vanyata rupam swarupena vyavyastiti. Bhagavatam 2.10.6. Under the influence of Maya, everyone living in this material world thinks that he is the master of everything. Ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. One thinks that there is no God or controller, that one is independent and can do anything. This is the material condition, and when one awakens from this ignorance, he is called liberated. Maharaj Yayati had delivered Devayani from the well, and finally, as a dutiful husband, he instructed her with the story about the he-goat and she-goat, and thus delivered her from the misconception of material happiness. Devayani was quite competent to understand her liberated husband, therefore she decided to follow him as his faithful wife. Om Jnanatimidandasya Gyananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadandikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuba Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone. So we're hearing a wonderful conclusion of this episode, this very actual monumental moment where, after having enjoyed 1,000 years, great opulence, great palaces, sense gratification, then the awakening happened, the dawning, or the aha moment, when King Yayati realized that despite unlimited or practically unlimited varieties of material enjoyment cannot satisfy the soul. And this verse is a nice conclusion how, by sharing this parable, or he's basically belittling their whole exchange, it's more or less saying how petty are these material affairs of our life. Meeting, Maharaj says, woo, the relationships we want deep relationships, but in this material world the relationships are generally insubstantial. And the courting, the attempts to try to enjoy the difficulties that arise therefrom. And so he's taken his whole, as a great king, he's presented it as just a kind of cute little funny story. But actually, because it's spoken by someone who's achieved a platform of vairagya or detachment, it's a very powerful story. It's actually imbued with a particular potency to awaken transcendental knowledge. So he's more or less acting as the spiritual master of his wife. And she, it says here, she was qualified, she understood this story. It was presented as if a funny joke for entertainment. But she actually grasped the deeper import that the real spiritual life or human life does not mean simply exchanging in this material realm, in this material platform. That is considered as the summa bonum in the material concept of life. But Prabhupada is explaining in the purport that the real position of spiritual life means that one awakens beyond that. So I thought we might look at a little description of Maya. It says, the Shruti mantra says, Vishnu Maya Midam Pashan. Devotee sees this whole manifestation, this whole cosmic manifestation as an expansion of the Lord's illusory potency, Vishnu Maya. It's also described in other places in the Bhagavatam, Aham Mameti, I and mine. So we might ask, why is I and mine Maya? I exist. If I have something, it's mine. What's the big deal? What's wrong with I and mine? But the Maya position is when the bodily concept of life is so prominent, it's so ingrained in our conception of self, that if I identify my body as I, and anything related to the body as mine, that is Maya. That is certainly Maya. And so even as devotees, we've come to the temple, we've taken shelter of the process, we chant Hare Krishna. But we're still, for the majority, we're not actually free from that disease. That's still very prominent, where we are living a conception wherein we're conceiving that this realm is the reality. Everything here is substantial, and the subtle implications that it will last forever, and whatever I'm doing with my body is very important, and I am my body. So even as devotees who've taken up sadhana, we're still not free. We may be far from free from Maya. So we go out and we try to help people get free from Maya, but we can know that we're also certainly, most likely, still encased in a very thick false ego or ahankar conception of life. So this is also described nicely in the 11th canto. I'm studying this section wherein the Nava-yogendras, who are Mahabhagavat, enlightened, pure devotees, they are answering questions by King Nimi, who's asking, what is Maya? How does one get free from Maya? And this is a nice verse that we may know. Bhayam ditya biniveshana syat isharapitasya viparyo smritihi tadmayato buddha abhijitam bhaktiaike sham guru deva tatma. That fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. So here he's saying, Prabhupada says, when one actually awakens from material life, it's like waking up from a dream. We have a dream, we get so absorbed in whatever it was, that we come back to this realm and say, what is... So similarly, we hear from the perfected souls that this whole universe actually, it's mentioned here. Although the duality of the material world does not ultimately exist, the conditioned soul experiences it as real under the influence of his own conditioned intelligence. This imaginary experience of a world separate from Krishna can be compared to the acts of dreaming and desiring. When the conditioned soul dreams at night of something desirable or horrible, or when he daydreams of what he would like to have or avoid, it creates a reality that has no existence beyond his imagination. The tendency of the mind is to accept and reject various activities based on sense gratification. Therefore, an intelligent person should control the mind, restricting it from the illusion of seeing things separate from Krishna. And when the mind is thus controlled, he will experience actual fearlessness. That's the next verse. So that's certainly a fearful position, finding ourselves in a realm that has no connection with Krishna. Because Krishna is the root, the mula of all existence, the param satyam. He is the reality. So if someone is living in a world where there's no connection with reality, that certainly is scary. And that's what we see throughout this world. People become so confused and depressed and scared and fearful and angry and envious because they're living in a whole conception of life without conception of God or what's reality. It's like if a child is separated from a young child, a very young, like a baby, they're separated from their parents, and they're in this. They feel totally alienated. No matter what you give them, toys, or they can't feel satisfied. So similarly, so much suffering is going on in this world because people have lost that connection. They're unable to perceive their relationship with Krishna. So much suffering is there, even on the material platform, and then in the mind. And so this verse continues, and living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord. He also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. That's what's mentioned here, that actually muktir hitvanyata rupam swarupena vyavastiti. Real mukti means achieving one's swarup siddhi, eternal divine spiritual position. That's who we actually are. So therefore, aham mameti is illusion because it's a misconception of who the I and my is. In the perfected stage, there is I and mine. You hear the pastimes of Krishna, cowherd boys, Madhu Mangal. There's I, the clothes, those are, but that's on an enlightened spiritual Satchidananda, free from ahankar platform. I was reading also recently that the sense of I is not actually the problem. The false sense of I is the problem, the false ego. The I is actually a source of unlimited bliss and happiness in its pure position. But when we understand it in an illusory identification with matter, so as we go through our days in Krishna consciousness, in the temple, preaching, wherever we go, we just can tune into this point that how much are we under the conception that I am my body, and those with whom I'm speaking are their body. It immediately drags our consciousness down to a much lower level. We're hearing the previous verse about the modes of nature. This is the lower modes of passion and ignorance when one is considering on the bodily platform. So therefore the Shastra, and Prabhupada would again and again, practically all his classes, he would just emphasize this point: you're not the body. He says this is the preliminary gate of spiritual understanding, because as long as that conception of life is there, then the higher forms of liberation from that material energy, they can actually manifest. We know it says, Brahmabhutah prasanatma na shochati na kangshati samasarveshu bhuteshu mad bhakti labhate param. That real bhakti means when one is off that platform, they're no longer hankering and lamenting in terms of the body. So even we are engaged in a lot of outreach activities, we still generally are under the influence of that strong bodily concept of life. And this story here was described in order to awaken her to her constitutional position. Going a little deeper, Prabhupada says, under the influence of Maya, everyone living in this material world thinks that he is the master of everything. So this bodily concept, actually, it's very gross, it's a very sinful situation. It means that I wanted to try to imitate God so much that I received a separate material body just so I could try to enact my, perverted desires. It's actually a very humbling situation. In the material world, the body is a very great thing. If I have a strong body, for the man, or if the woman has a very attractive body, wow, I'm doing so good. Look at me. But the truth is, it's such an actual abominable position, even just to have a material body. Therefore, when we hear great devotees, Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he would go into very deep internal states of consciousness. And when he would come out, he was looking at he said, "What is this?" And his disciple had to say, it's a material body. He said, "No." It was a very traumatic experience. to be encased in this material universe. So we're here because we have these unfulfilled desires based on our body and our mind. And that is all under this kingdom of illusion. The next text that we'll read describes that Devayani understood the materialistic association of husband, friends, and relatives like the association in a hotel full of tourists. So you have a hotel full of tourists. They can hang out, they're friends, but they know, okay, this was a great night. It was great hanging out with you guys. The relationships of society, friendship, love are created by the Maya of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Putting so much investment, conscious investment into this is it. A lot of times couples get together and they're like, this is it, honey. We're together. But they haven't read this verse from the Bhagavatam. This is like a hotel full of tourists. It's exactly like a dream. So Devayani is here getting that realization by the association of her husband. The next chapter in this discussion in the 11th canto is actually called Liberation from the Illusory Energy, which answers these questions, describing the method of becoming free from Maya's insurmountable grip. And what's interesting is that discussion, the question is asked, how does one get free from Maya? And the discussion is that Sri Antariksha, great Mahabhagavat, he begins by just explaining the nature of this material universe. Until you know what something is, you won't know how to operate that principle or utilize that. So first we have to understand what is this Vishnu Maya. And we have to understand how these material elements manifest from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How the false ego, when it comes in contact with the modes of goodness, passion, ignorance, it generates the mind, the senses, and the sense objects. All of those ingredients, more or less, they comprise the foundation of an illusory concept of life. Ultimately, that's the realm of duality. So therefore, I think something is good or I think something is bad based on my conception of myself. But that good and bad, again, it doesn't have any absolute existence. It's a combination of the external energy, and I'm completely separate. I'm actually a pure soul. So that's more or less the initial response that's given, is that understanding how this universe is created and how it also dissolves. We hear that at the end of the period of creation, there's a great fire emanates from the mouth of Anantashesha. And that fire becomes so hot that it scorches the whole universe. And then rain comes for 100 years, intense rain, the Samvartika clouds, the same clouds that were called by Indra to try to destroy Vrindavan. Those clouds, their real purpose is at the time of dissolution to inundate the whole universe. So then the universe becomes filled with water. And then what happens is that each of the elements merges into its successive, or rather its previous state. There's a very elaborate description, but I'll try to, it's described more in the third canto. Here's an example. Deprived of its quality of aroma by the wind, the element earth is transformed into water. Water, deprived of its taste by that same wind, is merged into fire. So then you have this inverse process. In the third canto, you have a description of how these universal elements manifest from Mahatattva, the Pradhan. Like I was mentioning, everything is in the Bhagavatam. How this whole universe comes, how it dissolves, how it's maintained, universal systems. Therefore, we say the real education is Srimad Bhagavatam. You don't need to go to college or university. Why? What do you learn there? Bhaktivinoda Thakur says you'll learn how to become an ass. You learn how to become more foolish. Because you'll be investing so much consciousness in the realm of Maya. There's no Bhagavatam class in the university. It's not going to be on your schedule when you register Srimad Bhagavatam class. But Bhagavatam is the real knowledge, right? So the different elements, they merge into their former, they lose one quality. Deprived of its quality of aroma, the element earth is transformed into water. So you have the unfolding where they're generated, and then they get wound back up, described like a spider. He creates the web on which he sits, and then at the end he draws it back into himself. So this whole kingdom, this whole deep reality that we invest ourselves in, life after life, whoosh, it just gets completely drawn up at the end of creation. And all those gross elements, they get wound up into the subtle elements, including the mind, even our senses, our mind, all of these things, they're going to be whoosh, wound up. Therefore, we can't say this is my body, this is my mind, this is my sweatshirt. No, it doesn't belong to us. It's going to get wound up at the time of dissolution. And then all of that gets merged into what's called pradhan. Pradhan is the unmanifest state. And then Mahavishnu is lying, the God is lying, and everything is within him in its unmanifest position. And that lasts for a very long time, until the next cosmic manifestation. So this whole kingdom, that's what we're hearing in the story here that King Yayati is explaining. Don't get too attached to all of this seeming drama of the material world. Okay, we had this relationship and we went over here and did something with another she-goat, and the other goat found out, and the goat had to be castrated, and then the goat was lamenting. From an enlightened view, that's what all of our, it's a little bit petty affairs that we invest so much consciousness. It's all going to be at a certain point. So, muktir hitvanyata rupam swarupena vyavastiti. To understand our real position, the real reality. Utishta jagrita. Prapyavaram nibudat. Kshurasiddhara nishita duratiya. Durgas kitam tat kavayo vadanti. The Upanishad tells, awake, arise, awake up from our sleeping condition. That the spiritual life is sharp like a razor's edge. If one is not careful, there can be danger. So that is saying, Jeev Jago, awaken ourselves to that deeper spiritual reality. Therefore we sometimes see in Kirtan, when people start to wake up, people start to arise. We saw it the other day with one of our friends, Abraham. Suddenly just intense, just dance, like, yes, like I'm getting it. I'm waking up. We don't want to be under those lower modes. And even in some ecstatic time, we're feeling, okay. No, we have to shake out of that. And then the soul is starting to, it's like that breath of fresh air. It's like our head's been down under this material illusion, and we've been kicked and spat on by Maya. Now suddenly, we get that breath of fresh air of spiritual knowledge. So that is the injunction of the Vedas, asato ma sadgama. Go from asat, or illusion, to truth. Tamasi ma jyotir gama. Don't stay in darkness, go to the light. Mrityo ma amrita gama. Don't keep taking repeated birth and death, but achieve immortality. So that is the invitation. That's the invitation to all conditioned souls that the Vedas are giving. The Vedas are an emanation from Krishna in form of Shabda Brahman, his literary mercy manifestation. The Shastra is, it's a form of mercy to invite all of the forgetful souls back to their original position. And among so many different scriptures that may be there, you're not going to find the type of clarity and precision, depth, profundity, and clarity, I venture to say, than Srimad Bhagavatam. You're not going to find any more descriptive. Therefore, our acharyas say, even if you have a huge library and there's a huge fire and all the books burn, if the Srimad Bhagavatam stays, there is no loss. And that's pretty heavy. That means that all these literatures, the Bhagavatam says, hearing and chanting about topics other than Krishna, this is like a place of pilgrimage for crows. It's like the dirty, because it's, again, the materialistic education, it's not connecting us with the higher reality. So it's more of a disturbance, actually. So those are some thoughts on this nice topic and verse. If anyone wants to contribute to the discussion by adding a comment or question or your own realization, we can take that. Is there a mic, Jai Baladevi? Could you grab it? No, we need, because we have advanced technology. We have a webcast. Yeah, he's got a question. He's what we got. To read the verse.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much for the class. Prabhu, you were mentioning about, you were saying about that Brahmabhutah stage, right? So what is the Brahmabhutah stage? If we are in Brahmabhutah stage, we will get fell down from the devotional life or not?
Well, that's a good question. This question is, what is the Brahmabhutah stage? Brahmabhutah can refer to different levels of realization. For a Jnani, they can also achieve Brahmabhutah. Brahmabhutah means being situated in Brahman. So there's, as far as I know, understand, there's degrees of Brahmabhutah. Brahmabhutah prasanatma, na shochati na kankshati, samasarve tu bhushetu, madbhaktim labhate param. Generally, it's described that when one achieves nishtha, bhakti nishtha, then they're not encumbered by the bodily concept. They're more or less operating on the spiritual platform. So we also hear the language of self-realization. What does self-realization mean? Well, Jnani also becomes self-realized, and that's described as a preliminary stage to achieve bhakti. So just Brahmabhutah is not the goal, just being off the bodily concept. But it is a prerequisite. So a Brahmavadi, he can through Gyan, he can achieve liberation. He can understand and get freedom from birth and death by realizing Soham. What is that? These Vedic injunctions, I am that, Tattvamasi, so I am spirit, Aham Brahmasmi. He realizes, he actually realizes I'm not this body, I'm spirit. So many yogis are after this. So Brahmavadi or Paramatma, a yogi, he can also come to the spiritual platform. But the problem is that unless they come to bhakti, Bhagavatam says they fall down from there. Vimuktamanina. They think they're liberated. But the higher perception is unless one engages in devotional service to Krishna, it's not real liberation. Therefore, the real mukti, the real Brahmabhutah, is swarupena vyastiti, achieving the siddha swarupa, because then they won't fall. If one achieves that, that's a very high level, then he doesn't fall down. Otherwise, if he's on Brahmabhutah platform, but he can make aparad, like a Mayavadi. Mayavadi may be after Brahma platform, but because he's doing so much aparad, saying no, Krishna doesn't have a form. This is all, so many spiritual circles, they say God is formless, but this is an offense. Therefore, they think they're liberated, but they fall. Is that okay, Boo? Very good question. Thank you. Yes, welcome, Jai Baladev.
Hare Krishna, bro. Thank you for your class. Even though I wasn't here for it, that's what you were thinking, obviously. Thank you for what. But I'll check it out online. But maybe you can answer some questions about the report, some points I appreciate in the verse for today.
Yeah. I can just give you a gist of what we covered. We basically talked about...
That would be great too, to extend it longer, so
we talked about Maya. This couple, they were totally absorbed in their activities, but when we understand the description of the Bhagavatam and how, in one sense, insignificant these activities are, on the bodily concept of life, everyone is in Maya. Even we think we're devotee and we're preaching, we're more or less under this, very deeply still under Vishnu Maya. Vishnu Maya Idam Pashan. The whole universe, it's a Mayic. Until we get that realization, we're not actually a devotee. A real devotee is a very high thing. So then we looked at the 11th canto in terms of what does Maya consist of? And what does it mean to be free from Maya? And there's a verse that fear arises when we identify with aham mameti, I and mine, on the bodily platform. But there's a true I and mine. That's the spiritual. So the verse Prabhupada mentioned is that when one really achieves their spiritual identity, that's pure. Otherwise, we're still on the I and my platform. And then the way to get free is to understand how this material energy works. It's different elements that are unfolded, and then again they get wound back up. So we're so attached to things, but very soon they're going to vanish into the unmanifest pradhan. So that was a little what we discussed, but I'm sorry for repeating that for all of you who are here.
Well, that reminds me, in chapter 2, verse 25 of the Gita, Prabhupada says things have to be repeated in order to understand the matter thoroughly. So thank you for repeating. My appreciation of this verse, and maybe you could expand on it, appreciation. It mentions in this verse for today that this story regarding the she-goat and he-goat was presented in a funny, joking, and entertaining manner. So I really appreciated that statement because it reminds me of something, a class that I never forgot, well, at least the statement that Nityananda Prabhu gave some years ago. And he said that sometimes being too grave is a form of sense gratification. And so that reminds me that a lot of times when we read the scriptures, we think devotees are supposed to look a certain way, talk a certain way, and think a certain way. But we could see that if you go in a store, the first thing they'll ask you is, what's your size? And so sometimes we say, my size is exactly like the devotee I appreciate, but everyone has different sizes. So this reminds me of another purport in the Bhagavatam, the Canto 1, chapter 4, verse 1. Prabhupada mentions in that purport that personal realization does not mean that one doesn't follow in the footsteps of the Acharyas, but at the same time, one should present Krishna consciousness, he says, in an interesting manner, so that it may fit the time, place, and circumstances. So the way we talk to a certain group of people, we may not talk to another group of people. So my question is that could cause conflict between devotees because when we have this narrow-minded mentality that the devotee should look a certain way, talk a certain way, and think a certain way, then that could create aparas. And we see that in the scriptures that there's many varieties of devotees who preach according to time, place, and circumstances. So maybe you could elaborate on that subject matter, that causes me to create aparas when I first came to Krishna consciousness, because I thought I'll use an example like Jitendriya. He's one of the, obviously, Krishna says, Prabhupada says anyone who stays in Krishna consciousness is a sincere devotee, but the way he maybe talk is unorthodox, but it still gets the job done. So maybe you could elaborate. I'm glad he didn't hear me. All right, Krishna.
Yeah, the devotee has primary and secondary characteristics. The primary characteristic is that he's surrendered to Krishna. He's serving Krishna. There may be other qualities that are manifest, but it's difficult to actually ascertain the position of someone else. That's not so much recommended. For the Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, he may be eligible to discriminate between these three classes: the beginner class, the intermediate class, and the advanced class. But until we become to that level, then generally devotees may get in trouble trying to ascertain where someone's at. At the same time, someone's activities reveal their consciousness. So we are encouraged to conform, if you will, or we are encouraged to adopt certain culture and standard and practice that was given by Srila Prabhupada for his society, which included things like dress and behavior. But it becomes a danger to think that in of itself is the indication. Rather, one has to see the activities, and most importantly, Prabhupada says the speech. Prabhupada says, a fool remains undiscovered so long as he doesn't speak. So when we open our mouth, that's when we can understand someone's consciousness. So therefore, the devotees are supposed to have sadhu sangha, or katha, discussing Krishna. That way it will purify them, and at the same time, naturally, there'll be a natural understanding, okay, this person's at this level. You know, you're just talking to devotees and someone's like speaking all this really profound, amazing knowledge and nectar. So wow, you can. But if that doesn't go on, then the tendency is we just start talking about so many material things. It can even be in our society, even in our movement. Oh, this is happening there and that's happening there. It's all connected to Krishna. But the real standard of Krishna Katha means directly about Krishna. Let's talk about God. What are the qualities? What are the activities? What's the philosophy? And you think, okay, I'm going here and you're going there and so is here, and that's all okay. But the real Krishna Katha is what will satisfy the heart. There's unlimited activities going on. So even within our devotional community, we can get trapped into the lower end of the katha. It's called Gramya Katha, the village talk. So-and-so did that. Yeah, but last week I heard so-and-so did this. Yeah, but they're devotees, so it's Krishna Katha, right? But it's what's coming behind that. And it's generally an urge just to speak. I want to talk about something. So unless we're reading and doing our sadhana strongly, that urge to speak becomes misused. But if everyone is really studying and preaching, and then what comes out is going to be fruitful. So we don't want to pass judgments on the bodily concept. That's one of the main points that we're describing here. Anything else? Any other question? Okay. I just had another, I was going to see if there wasn't any other question, but the last point was that in presenting Krishna consciousness in an interesting way, that's also certainly required. But that requires empowerment and creativity. That requires inspiration. But these books are like, sometimes the real nectar is camouflaged. It looks like just words and pages, so it seems a little dry. But when the mercy comes, then we can go deeper into it, and you can draw out more. But that's actually an important quality of the speaker, to present it in a relevant, interesting, because it's actually the most interesting. The Bhagavatam is not boring. It's not dry. It's so profound. It's beyond what we can even verbalize. So that is helpful quality of the speaker. Yes, Brian Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I have a question about occupation, and I know now that I have to devote my life, or I want to devote my life. I know what I'm here for, to God, to Krishna, and to serve Krishna, and to go deeper and deeper into the literature. But on the earthly, bodily side of things, I play music, and I love to play music. And I know that I learned now that I can play music through Krishna, or Krishna can play music through me and use me as an instrument. But you mentioned earlier about daydreaming and daydreaming, and I catch myself daydreaming all the time about what, how incredible it'll be to
You're not the only one.
The music that'll come out. So I guess my question is, how do I make that music that I dream of and enjoy it without being wrong for doing it?
Yeah. So one of the points Maharaj mentioned over the weekend was that, or prior to the weekend, he was discussing Bhagavatam, that we have our natures. Someone might be like this, someone might be like that, someone may work in this way. There's nothing wrong with that. That's natural. You can't fight that, and you shouldn't try to negate that or change that. But rather what you have to do is taking that nature, you find out how can the word is dovetail. Krishna has a plan of how he wants society and devotion to spread throughout the world. So how can I take my propensity and engage it in that mission? Then that nature that I have, it becomes this cause of liberation or advancement, purity. You have to find how to use your music to facilitate the development and spread of Krishna consciousness. If you do that, then your music becomes direct anga of bhakti. Now there are some cases where you have to do something, it's not directly, but the best way is using our propensity nature in the service of Srila Prabhupada. He's our founder Acharya. So he has a big vision how Krishna consciousness can spread all over the world. Practically no one else has such big vision. Prabhupada was a real visionary. He had a huge plan. And there's room for everyone and everything, more or less, if it's, most things in that plan. And Prabhupada even would engage people like George Harrison, and George Harrison said, okay, I'm ready to move into the temple. Prabhupada said, no, you're a musician, you play music, but you play music for Krishna. And he did that. So many people became devotees because of George Harrison and the Beatles. And he was writing very deep, so he didn't have to change what he was doing, but he had to change that why. That's the best way to dovetail our propensities in Krishna's service. Okay, anything else? Thank you all for your very... there might be one more thing, I'm sorry. Because we have 3 minutes, we didn't say Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai yet, so there's one more point on this Maya. We described how it exists, how it functions, but how to see this universe not as an illusion, but as a aspect or manifestation of Krishna. That is what's entailed in overcoming. So we have a beautiful section, Krishna speaking, Uddhava has delivered a letter from Krishna to the gopis who are feeling separated from Krishna. So what does he say? These are the words of the personality of Godhead. So the gopis, they have the purest love for Krishna. And now Krishna has just left them. They're feeling this intense pang of separation. They're crying all day. That separation is actually purifying. It's blissful, actually, because they're feeling connected to Krishna. But seemingly they're separate from Krishna. They can't find Krishna. So Krishna's over in Dwarka, but he's feeling their separation also. So he decides to send a letter. Uddhava, as a student of Brihaspati, had very sharp intelligence. So instead of handing over the written message, he thought it wise to read it personally and explain it to them. Uddhava continued, these are the words, the personality of Godhead. My dear gopis, my dear friends, please know that separation between ourselves is impossible at any time, at any place, or under any circumstances, because I am all-pervading. Prabhupada explains, love Krishna or Krishna consciousness is therefore the perfection of real knowledge and understanding things as they are. Our minds can never be vacant. The mind is constantly occupied with some kind of thought, and the subject matter of such thought cannot be outside the 8 elements of Krishna's energy. One who knows this philosophical aspect of all thoughts is actually a wise man, and he surrenders unto Krishna. The gopis are the epitome of this perfectional stage of knowledge. Their minds are always in Krishna. The mind is nothing but the energy of Krishna. Actually, any person who can think, feel, and will cannot be separated from Krishna, but the stage in which he can understand his eternal relationship with Krishna is called Krishna consciousness. The disease condition in which he cannot understand his eternal relationship with Krishna is the contaminated stage, or Maya. Uddhava continued reading Krishna's message. Nothing is separate from me. The whole cosmic manifestation is resting on me and is not separate from me. Before the creation, I was existing. End quote. This is confirmed in the Vedic literature. Eko Narayana Asinna Brahma Nishenaha. Before the creation, there was only Narayan. Transcendental knowledge of the Absolute is no longer necessary for you. You were accustomed to loving me from the very beginning of your lives. My dear gopis, to increase your super excellent love for me, I have purposely separated myself from you so that you may be in constant meditation on me. So, that is the essence of Krishna's message that he shares, that you can't think, you can't separate anything in this material universe, although it's in the illusory, seeming illusory conception. You can't actually separate anything from Krishna. Krishna is all-pervading, all these material elements, everything. They're a manifestation of Krishna's energy. The way we're perceiving them is illusory. Our conception of them is illusion. But in of themselves, everything is actually Krishna. So how to make that connection, switching from the bodily concept of an egocentric, I'm the controller, I'm the doer, I and mine conception, to Krishna-centered. Everything is a product of Krishna's energy. Everything can be dovetailed in Krishna's service. That is the... Prabhu says this is, Krishna consciousness is the final link in the yogic chain. The link that binds one to the Supreme Person, Krishna. That's in the perfection of yoga. So the gopis exemplify that perfectional stage. Always thinking of Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Go Premanandi.